Welcome back to the Forge. Today I'm going to be working on a belt grinder attachment, working on installing a contact wheel onto my belt grinder. The way that this is going to work out is I've got this piece of 1.5 inch tubing. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to cut some notches in it that's going to fit the axle. This is actually the axle that the wheel fits on. I'm going to try to fit that down in there. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I've already done some of the cutting, and now I just need to grind this to the final shape so that this will actually fit down into it. Let's get this thing set up. All right, so now we've got the pole that is going to function as the attachment arm for this belt grinder. I've got the end all carved out, channeled out, and now the axle will actually fit down into it pretty tightly. And what I'm going to end up doing here is I need to go figure out where exactly I'm going to mount this axle. I need to clean off the axle, get some of this mill scale off, and then I'm going to go ahead and weld these two pieces together. So let's go ahead and move back to the belt grinder and do this work trying to figure out where exactly this thing is going to attach to. All right, so the belt grinder is back here in the back of my workshop, and it's kind of an interesting little hybrid of some built pieces and some purchased pieces. But what we've got going on is this system right down here. All right, this is the belt grinder. So the belt grinder functions by driving this big, huge belt, which is essentially sandpaper, and it spins really fast. And I can then put stuff up against this, and it grinds it off. All right. The problem that I've got right now is the only attachment that I have is a flat surface. Right. And what I'm doing is I'm installing a wheel that gives me a curved surface to actually grind on. So we're going to be measuring that up and figuring out where exactly I need to position that and going through that in the next few minutes. So this is the wheel that is going to be part of this belt grinder here. It slides on here pretty smoothly. And then what I need to do is just grab a washer and the nut that will fasten this down. Actually, I'm going to put 2 washers down. What's up, Raphael? How you doing, man? Good to see you. All right. And that's perfect. That's super tight on there. This wheel isn't going anywhere. It spins really nicely. I'm actually going to give this just a smidge loose in here so that it's not locked on entirely. There we go. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to slide this arm into the control piece here. I'm going to get it, figure out how deep it needs to be. There it goes. Yeah, I heard that they closed down Virginia schools. I'm just waiting to hear what they're going to do for our schools. At this point, I still don't know anything. You guys don't know anything other than we have to wait until the end of the week, essentially. Hmm. All right, so this is a belt grinder, and the whole point of this thing is that it runs really fast, and it runs with this belt on it, and this belt is made out of sandpaper. All right, and so it grinds off metal really fast. And right now, I've got it set up for what's called a flat platen. It's just a flat piece. This thing. So the belt goes across here, and I put the metal up against it like this. The problem is I only have one flat surface to grind against, right? Whereas with the wheel, this wheel gives me a curved surface to grind against. So I can take off material a lot faster, but I can also grind a curved surface into my work. So it works for a couple of different things. All right. So now I've got it marked off where I'm going to weld to. And now what I need to do is take this wheel off. I'm going to protect the axle from the welding process because welding creates a lot of sparks and it creates a lot of debris. And then we're going to get to welding here in the next few minutes. All right, so we're going to get ready for welding. One of the interesting things with welding is that the cleanliness of the metal makes a huge difference. All right, so what I'm going to end up doing here is I'm going to take this metal and I need to clean off all of what's called the mill scale. And mill scale is all of the stuff that makes the metal actually look this dark gray color. If we take a look at where I've already ground, it's already silver. All right, so on this piece, it's already pretty good. I might do just a little bit of grinding to clean up the corners a little bit. But for the piece that we're actually doing the welding to, this is covered in a lot of mill scale right now. So I need to grind this all off and make it clean around the whole area that I want to do my welding at. So I'm going to set that up. I'm going to chalk it out first, and so I know where I need to grind and where I don't need to grind. And then I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of grinding here. All right. So now I've got some guidelines as to where I'm actually going to grind. I'm going to be grinding around this chalk line and on the inside of this and on the outside. Essentially, I'm going to grind away the chalk line and get rid of that so that it's all clean metal. All right, so now I've cleaned off a good bit of the mill scale that was all built up on here, and we've got a shiny surface that I'm going to be welding to. Next thing we need to do is figure out where exactly this axle is going to sit now that we've cleaned it off. We lost our mark from earlier, so I'm going to go ahead and reposition this and make sure that it sits right before I weld it on. All right, now that I've got these two matched up where I want them to be, I'm going to go ahead and move to getting them secured for welding and move to the actual welding process. All right, so I'm using this welding square. This is a big magnet essentially. And what I've done is I've clamped it down and I've got the magnet holding this piece of metal in place so that as I go to weld and I do just the littlest bit of welding here on the two sides, it'll actually hold it in place rather than letting this thing slide at all or jostle out of place. All right, so to talk about welding just a little bit, welding is a process where we're going to take two metals and actually melt them together into one. All right, and we do that in this case by applying a huge electrical current. Right. So the very first thing to know about welding is that it is really dangerous. Please do not try it at home. All right. The next thing to know about welding is that it produces a spark that is brighter than the sun. It is bright enough to actually give you sunburn. So that's a huge part about why I'm wearing long sleeves. I'm going to be wearing gloves. I'm going to have a face mask on, and I've got everything protected. All right. Next thing to know is that for welding, what we're going to do is we're going to take this end, and this is a ground connection. I'm going to connect that to my piece, and then I'm going to take the other end. This is the actual hot end, and this is going to feed a small wire out. And as it does that, it gives off an electrical charge through that wire. And it's that electrical charge that actually makes the welding process happen. It heats it up so hot that it melts the two pieces of metal together, and you end up getting one mixed piece of metal. All right, so now we've got our two pieces of metal actually welded together. And you can see those little welds right here, and then on the other side, about the same spots. And you see on there, there's a whole bunch of spatter that has built up on this. This is because of the type of welding that we're doing today, and it's called flux core welding. And flux core welding gives off a huge amount of sparks and other just junk that gets ejected as you're doing the welding process. And this is part of why I put this tape around the end, so that it would protect the end that the actual axle goes on and prevent any of this this extra spatter from getting on it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to let this thing cool down for a few minutes and sit here. And then we're going to go ahead and take it over to the belt grinder and get it tried out, make sure that it works before we weld it all the way together. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take this back to the belt grinder. We're going to throw it on the belt grinder and actually see if we can get this thing spun up and working a little bit. Here we go. So wheels attached, can spin freely. Now let's find out if it works. All right, so it seems to work. We've got the actual wheel spinning here, so I'm going to go ahead and grind some metal and show you what I'm talking about. All right, so that was it on slow speed. Does just a little bit. We can see that it ground away at the very surface of this, but it hasn't done too much. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn it up to a medium speed. See how it does on medium speed before I turn it up all the way to high. All right, so if we take a look at this, we can actually see that it's starting to grind that curved profile into it, and that profile actually matches the profile of the wheel. So the really cool thing with this is I can use this now. I'm going to go ahead and turn up to high speed, see how it functions on high speed before we go any further. And as long as it functions well on high speed, we're going to go ahead and weld the whole thing up, get it all function together, and then I'll show you guys some grinding with the actual sword that I'm working on. All right, so it definitely works. We've got a functioning system here. The belt grinder wheel is ready to get fully attached. All right, so on this pass, I'm actually going to be doing a lot more welding. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to weld all the way across this joint. I'm going to draw the bead down back and forth and welding this pipe, this outer pipe, to the bar underneath there. the prettiest of welds, but definitely a functional weld. Now I'm going to flip it over, do the back side. A little bit neater of a weld on that time. It's got the better look there. It's a little bit more stacked and neat. I'm going to go ahead and take this duct tape off before it gets too hot here. The heat is actually traveling up the length of the pipe and melting the duct tape just a little bit. All right, so ran across a little bit of an issue here. This may or may not affect the performance of the wheel. We'll find out in a few minutes here. But the duct tape partially melted onto the axle. So right now I'm just brushing it off, hoping to get as much of that residue off as we can. All right, now I can put this wheel back on. Let's make sure it slides on there neat. Yeah, this is what I was worried about. Oh, there it goes. All right, so got the wheel on, put our two washers on, and then get the bolt going. Just a little bit too tight. Something got underneath this bolt. I'm going to go ahead and loosen this up. Dump out what's underneath there. It's still making that dragging sound. Let's take a look at these washers. Oh yeah, there's all kinds of stuff built up on this washer. So I'm going to go ahead and just wipe this down. Clean off the washer, make sure that it's nice and smooth. And now when we put it back on, we should be ready to roll. Oh yeah, so much smoother now. All right, great. We're gonna go ahead and clean up the welding stuff, and then we're gonna transition to a little bit of actual grinding here. So belt grinder totally works. This contact wheel attachment is functioning perfectly, as well as I could expect it to. And from now on, I'm going to be able to do a lot more with my belt grinder than I was before. So thanks for joining in. We'll see you next time.